2022, and I'm standing on top of the archaeological site of Huántar, located in the high ridges of the Cordillera Negra in the north-central highlands of Peru. Next to me is the local leader, Marco Reyes, and I hear him say to himself, incluso en una sequía, Huaylas es verde. Even in a drought, Huaylas is green. Now, we were in the middle of the dry season, and water was particularly scarce that year. And you see, Huaylas is located in the Callejón de Huaylas, which is a high mountain range in the north-central highlands of Peru. It is located on the western side, where the climate is semi-arid and dry. And communities in this region get their water from annual rainfall and reservoir systems. On the opposite side is the Cordillera Blanca, or the White Mountain Range, home to numerous glaciers that provide their slopes and communities with water year-round. And despite this location of Huaylas in the Cordillera Negra, it's always been described as a lush and vibrant landscape. So much so that in the 1800s, the Italian explorer Antonio Raimondi even nicknamed the town Huaylas Cosecha, or Huaylas of the harvest, for the abundance of crops that the valley would produce. And so I began to ask a simple question. So why does water flow in Huaylas, even in a drought? And the answer to this question is at the center of what I want to share with you all today. But before I move on, I want to ask you all a question. What does archaeology mean to you? What are some of the things that first come to mind? Maybe you're thinking about Indiana Jones, the Aztecs, the Great Pyramids, or excavations like the one shown in this photo here. Maybe it's something that's interesting and alluring to you. But what does archaeology really have to do with the problems that we are facing today? Well, I'm here to tell you that despite its namesake, archaeology is not just the study of what was and used to be, but it is the study of how people continue to live and thrive and survive through change. In the Callejón de Huaylas, where I work, the landscape is dynamic and constantly changing. It is an environment that is prone to drought, to landslides, and to earthquakes. Yet people have been thriving and constantly adapting and living in this landscape over the course of multiple millennia. However, in the 20th century, climate change has caused increasing melting of the glaciers. And so the melting of these glaciers, mixed with the seismic environment, has caused disastrous landslides throughout the valley. One particular event was a 1970 earthquake that occurred in the region. And this earthquake, mixed with these melting glaciers, caused a catastrophic avalanche that destroyed entire towns, killed tens and thousands of people, and displaced many communities overnight. Now imagine if this was you. But instead of a landslide, we're talking about flash floods in the foothills of Appalachia, or ravaging fires in California, or intense hurricanes in the Gulf Coast or the Caribbean. What if you lost everything? What would you do? How would you feel? Now, in Huaylas, this was a community that was also deeply impacted by this earthquake. Many people in the community began to migrate out of the valley and beyond. Some returned to the ruins and the rubble and rebuilt from that. And others still began rebuilding on top of large archaeological sites. One of these sites was the archaeological site of Chupacoto, located in the Huaylas River Valley. And now archaeologists, they looked at this and they saw these ancient heritage sites being overrun by humans and wanted to protect these sites through conservation and study for science and research. I mean, imagine if somebody were to build their home in the middle of the Roman Colosseum or the plaza of Chichen Itza. But for many of these communities that just lost everything, these ancient sites were fresh foundations upon which they could rebuild their futures. While archaeologists were speaking the language of conservation, these communities were speaking the language of survival. Both were looking for some sort of sustainable solution to this problem, just in different ways. Now, to put things in a little bit more perspective, a recent study cites that 225 million people were displaced because of climate disasters in 2008 and 2018. 24.9 million were displaced from climate disasters in 2019 alone. 89% of these people were displaced between 2018 and 2019 came from the global south. And so why is this important? Because it shows us that disasters do not just destroy buildings, but they also fracture relationships between people, their landscapes, memory, and the past. In the Callejón de Huaylas, the landscape, climate change continues to change and impact people and their livelihoods today. In the Corriera Blanca, communities are not just worried about these increasing landslides, but they're also now worried about how these melting glaciers and their disappearance will impact water access in the future. In the Corriera Negra, communities are worried about these changing precipitation patterns because drought is becoming longer, more intense, crops are failing, water systems are becoming less reliable, and this water scarcity is becoming a concern on both sides of the valley. But in Huaylas, beneath the roads, landscapes, the houses, the land is laced with archaeological canal systems, stone-lined channels, and terraces that capture the water and recharge the soil. These are not just ancient ruins, they are functional technologies, and many of them still work. And so my job as an archaeologist is not just to discover these ancient ruins, but I map them, I listen, and I learn from and alongside the communities that I work with to try to come up with solutions for this issue of water. And so this is what we're doing as part of the Causay Pacha Archaeological Project, which comes from the Quechua words Causay, meaning living and alive, and Pacha, meaning land, earth, but also time. Acknowledging that these ancient ruins are not just remnants of a far-off past, but a part of a vital and living landscape that people are interacting with today. And so what we're doing is we're working closely with local water stewards, farmers, and other community members to map the past and present water technologies in Huaylas. But we're also working to document present-day governance systems and water management practices. And we're combining these technical and social systems with the real-life observations that people are experiencing in their landscapes today, such as these longer droughts, these drier seasons, and this concern over water scarcity. And this combination of knowledge is crucial because, as our collaborator, Martin Rodriguez, tells us, everything has a time for sowing, and each product has its season. You cannot sow before or after because you are the expense of the rain and of the environment, the climate as well. And you see, this knowledge is not written down in textbooks, but it is still empirical, precise, and rooted in long-term experience. This work, of course, is based on the work of indigenous researchers and other scholars like Sonia Adelaide, Victor Burks, Robin Wall-Kimmer, and many others whose methods are rooted in community-based approaches and traditional ecological knowledge. And what this shows us is that knowledge needs to be reciprocal, relational, place-based, and rooted in this long-term care for each other and for our land. This work is also based in decades of archaeological research in the Cordillera Negra, where archaeologists have documented ancient canal systems, silt dams, man-made wetlands, and reservoirs, much like the ones in these photos here. And what their work shows us is that water scarcity in the Andes is not new, but neither are the solutions. As my colleague and the director of the Past Water Futures Project acknowledges, quote, lack of water is not a modern phenomenon. It is a long-standing problem that was tackled in similar ways in the past. End quote. And so by documenting these water technologies, archaeology becomes more than preservation, but instead a tool for decision-making. Now, this is not about romanticizing the past or saying we need to return to these ancient technologies or ancient ways of life. But instead, what this work challenges us to do is to look back to see how people were adapting to these similar conditions in the past and try to carry this knowledge forward in new ways. You see, wireless is not unique. Communities all across the Andes and around the world are being forced to adapt to conditions they did not create. And what archaeology offers in this moment is perspective. It teaches us that resilience is not built overnight, and that sustainable solutions are not created and engineered in fancy laboratories, but they are created and shaped through long-term relationships between humans and their landscape. And it reminds us of something uncomfortable yet hopeful. That many of the solutions that we need might already exist. You see, traditional and indigenous knowledge systems are often treated only as cultural artifacts instead of technological expertise. But in Huaylas and the Cordillera Negra, these ways of knowing that are embedded in the landscape and through community memory are part of the very thing that keeps the valley green in a drought. And so what I want you to take away from this moment is that you do not need to be an archaeologist to begin this work. You just need to ask different questions about the places you live. What was here before all the roads and buildings? Who remembers how this land once functioned and how it's changed through time? What knowledge has been ignored because it did not look like innovation? Reimagining our futures does not mean creating something entirely new. It means looking at what's already beneath us, recognizing that diverse knowledge systems are valid and useful, and that what we need to be doing is working together to create these more sustainable solutions. Thank you.